This week is the Webby Awards, and for the first time they made a bold move to officially recognise creators as a category of their own.
This year was the year that we sort of decided to make the leap and really define this format as its own thing. There's something to the individual and their connection with that community that I think is pretty distinctive.
I wanted to know what it takes to win, and so I spoke to new Executive Director Jesse Feister.
We look at the numbers as a signal that there's something working, but then beyond that, is it something unique and innovative that you can point to? Every single entry is reviewed by multiple judges. They can sort of look at a space and define what excellence means.
But the Webby Awards are not just about the judges.
Once the nominees are selected, we go out to the internet and say, who's the best?
We also talk about AI and a whole lot more.
I think ultimately this is a tool that enables more people to be creative. I believe the creator community will ultimately find ways to embrace it.
This is a great episode, which I really hope you enjoy. So let's just jump straight into it. What motivated the introduction of creator-specific categories at the Webby Awards this year?
Yeah, so we've always recognized creators at the Webbies. So it's not that we haven't had creators at the Webbies over the last 29 years. I mean, creators are by definition like the drivers of the internet. So we've had categories that sort of embraced creators in different ways. We've had social, we've had video and film, podcasts. There's a lot of representation of creators within those categories, but we never had a standalone category specifically for the format itself. And so this year was the year that we sort of decided to make the leap and really define this format as its own thing. It's not just that these people are making content in these other verticals, but the format itself is a vertical in and of itself. So we felt like it was the right year. I've talked a little bit about how I think the pandemic was this watershed moment where the formats just evolved really, really rapidly, and you had people creating and consuming at like a scale that was just unprecedented. And so now we're a couple of years past that, and it's matured, and it's a real format now that I think we can put some definition around. And I think there's an opportunity to sort of put some structure into what excellence means and how creators sort of fit into the broader internet. And that's one of the things the Webbies does really well.
Great. You mentioned the word a couple of times there, definition. I'm sure there was quite a bit of debate around defining creator amongst the team. How did you kind of navigate that spectrum, defining what is a creator and what isn't?
Some of these decisions were made before my time. I'm 4 months in, so I've inherited, but I think that the team did a really good job with it. I will say, I think broadly, the difference in my view is the person themselves is fundamental to the content that's being consumed and how the audience engages with it. And that's a little bit different. You can see how you would have social content could be broader. There's a lot of different content across social media that isn't the person themselves. The person themselves isn't as maybe fundamental to the content across all social, but in creator content, the person creating the content is core to what the audience is consuming and how they engage with it. So we think that's a pretty good definition. I think it always has room to evolve because the internet's always evolving, but there's something to the individual and their connection with that community that I think is pretty distinctive, and that's new, right? Or it has existed, but it's really become a phenomenon in its own right over the last few years.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. And for anyone that's not aware of it, what's the selection process?
Right. So we have over 13,000 entries from all over the world, from every type of internet creator you could imagine. We've got people who build websites and apps. We've got podcasters. We've got creators now, of course, and brands and everyone in between. And so entries come through around the end of the year, beginning of towards like sort of January, we call for entries. And then the judging process is actually pretty defined. So we have an academy of over 3,000 individuals who are all sort of experts in their respective domains. They run the gamut from brands to creators themselves to sort of everyone and anyone who has sort of reached a threshold where they can sort of look at a space and define what excellence means. And so those every single entry is reviewed by multiple judges, and then as those judges sort of make their remarks and make their scores, they're sort of laddered up into sort of final nominees and then eventually a winner. But that process is very much defined by the academy, hiatus. And what's fun about the Webbies, I think, is we have the Webby Award, which is judged by the experts, but we also have the People's Voice Award, which is like the other side of the coin, where once the nominees are selected, we go out to the internet and say, who's the best? And so there are actually 2 awards for every category. There's the Webby Award and the People's Voice Award. And it's kind of a fun way to bring the internet's perspective to the table while also having still some expertise involved as well from the professionals.
That's great. I love that. And with creators, you can have someone who goes viral and gets millions and millions of views, or someone who is a real artist. Like, how do you balance that with the awards?
The numbers are a signal, right? Like you can't deny that the numbers represent that something is connecting and something matters, but it's not the whole story for what is excellent. So we look at the numbers as a signal that there's something working, but then beyond that, there's sort of what went into this creative process that makes it distinctive, that makes it stand out. Is it something unique and innovative that you can point to that's a real contribution to the format, or sort of like a real sort of something innovative that has been done distinctively and differently.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense to me as well. And one of the things that I love about creators, and we see it in my business, is just the explosion of creators within niches and how they have this really dedicated audience, but they're not reaching many, many people. How do you think about that as well? Because there are these fantastic creators that are producing this content, but perhaps again they're just maybe not as well known or as celebrated.
Yeah, I mean, some of my favorite creators are like the really niche ones who are doing something. I mean, that's the beauty of it, right? You find your niche, and there's someone out there making something for you, and that's like the joy of the format. We have a couple kind of subcategories within the parent creator categories that sort of follow a lot of the major buckets of content, like fashion and beauty, arts and music, and within those there is room for really anyone to participate. We're not looking at numbers exclusively. I think the judges are all looking at the work itself first, and then looking at the numbers as sort of a signal that maybe there's something happening. We also have, I think uniquely within that parent creator category, there's a second sort of subcategory, which is really just about excellence in the format. So we have awards for like best editing or best short form. So how the content is created itself can also be a method of evaluating what's excellent. And so we try to break up all sorts of different ways to evaluate what good is and make sure that we're sort of crediting all the different aspects of what goes into making something great.
That's great. And I'm sure that you got many, many, many submissions this year. Are there any things that kind of surprised you with what you saw?
I think what I found to be, personally, I found some just hilarious B2B creators, people doing stuff that I thought was absolutely unhinged, that fit within the context of B2B, but it's just like you think of B2B and you're like, that's just going to be very boring, straightforward content. I mean, there were people using AI to do all sorts of like really goofy product reviews and like songs around product reviews, just stuff that you're like, how is this? This is so creative and different, and yet it is B2B content. So there was a ton of great stuff from all across the board, of course, but I think you kind of expect that. You kind of know there's going to be excellence in a lot of those areas that you follow, but to see sort of some of these business creators come out of the woodwork with some really odd stuff, I thought was pretty fun.
I love that. And you mentioned AI there. AI and generative AI is obviously on everyone's mind at the moment. How do you kind of think that AI will evolve the awards and as we move forward, particularly within the creator space?
I have a lot of thoughts on this. I'll start by saying I think that there are like really important questions around how models are trained that are just fundamental to the creator community. I think my background in music, it's a big issue. How are models trained? Are people being attributed fairly? I think that that's critical. And I think that people participate, if their work is being used in some way for some sort of monetary outcome on the other side, then they deserve to be participating in that revenue. However, I think what gets lost in the big picture is that this technology is here to stay. It's a tool, ultimately. That's how I view it. And when we think about what it means for creators broadly, I think there's a couple different areas that you can think about it in terms of. So one is just this: how do we simplify the things that are not creative? There's so much tediousness that goes into making content still, despite all these workflow products out there, despite all these new technologies. It's still actually a lot of time is spent not doing things that are fundamentally creative if you are a creator. And so my hope and view is that you're going to see a lot of stuff sort of become easier, and you'll have more time to dedicate to your core value, which is the creativity of your work. Two, beyond that, I think there's an idea around, well, then how can you think beyond? How do you scale your creativity? So can you go beyond what you might have been able to do in the past by using a tool to take your creativity further? So I think that's like the next frontier is like, well, what else can you do? If you have an idea now, your barriers to achieving it are lower. So what's that going to mean for how you create? I think it's going to depend on the creator, but I think there's going to be some amazing work that comes out of this next era because we've just brought down the barrier to people being creative. So while there's a lot of serious questions in the space, and I share that concern for the good of the community, I think ultimately this is a tool that enables more people to be creative, and I believe the creator community will ultimately find ways to embrace it and just, change the world in more interesting ways than we've seen before.
Makes sense. And you mentioned as well your background there in the music. Do you think there are things that creators can learn from the evolution of the music industry?
Always, right? I think that there's something about music as sort of the canary in the coal mine.
Mm-hmm.
Music tends to be one of the first formats to be disrupted, at least in my career and my experience. And I think there's a couple of things, there's a number of lessons you can take from music. The one that I look at that I think is most analogous to AI is just the transition from analog recording to digital recording and everything that came past that, which I'm old enough, I'm aging myself by making the statement, but my first studio experience as a drummer was in an analog recording studio where we recorded on 2-inch tape, and it was right when Pro Tools was kind of becoming a thing. It was amazing to work in a studio like that. It's like special. You get to hang out. There's like people smoking cigarettes, and just it's a vibe to be in an old school studio. But it also like took a long time to make a record, and also it was very like hard to get into the studio in the first place. It took like months of saving up money, or if you're lucky enough to have a record deal, it was like a really limited number of people even had a chance to make music in that way. Digital recording came to market, and it was a really, really big deal in the community. People were thinking it was the end of the world. It was the worst thing ever that happened to music because now it was different. It sounded a little bit different. And there were some trade-offs in the recording process that were made for the efficiency of being able to record digitally. But it also opened up this whole tremendous new world of people being able to make music at home. People who had things to say, who maybe wouldn't have been able to get into a studio prior, now could step in and say it. And that's changed music fundamentally now. You look at who's making music, it's such a wider range. You have people from every walk of life able to put a song down without nearly the amount of friction that you used to have. And so I think that's sort of the analogy is, yes, it's different, right? When it becomes easier to create, you do lose some things along the way. I think we can acknowledge that there was something special about analog recording, and I acknowledge that. But at the same time, look at what we got. I think that to bring more creative people to the fold and to give them the opportunity to create is ultimately a good thing. I think that's one of the most exciting things about how technology evolves. It's what I care a lot about. So I think I see AI through that same lens. I think we're going to have more people creating. We're going to have a different type of creativity. We will lose some of the things we love about creating today, but we're going to gain a lot in the process. And ultimately, when more people get to show up into the world and say something, I think we're in a better world.
Yeah. I personally had a similar journey where I worked for Universal Music maybe about 15 years ago, and I worked with some of the biggest artists there or in and around them at the head office. And when I started to get immersed in the creator economy, or what is now called the creator economy, about 10 years ago, I saw the parallels between these big artists like Lady Gaga and Justin Bieber as these emerging creators. However, the excitement for me was that these creators had a huge audience and there was very little commercial skills or team around them, and I really wanted
Right.
to support them and work with them and help them. How do you think, are there things that you see where creators can learn from that sort of fandom that perhaps musicians and artists had in years gone by?
I think musicians have always been building worlds and brands around themselves, whether they would call it that or not. There's something just inherent around when you put a record out, you make music that has a distinctive sound, you put some sort of branding around that, you show up at a show a certain way, and the community and the people that have shown up to music shows and been music fans for years always felt that sort of like, this is my tribe. And that was happening in the world. It was happening kind of through listening to records or looking at magazines. And now it's like, it's just way more intense and close. And there is a lot of parallel to that with the broader creator landscape, because these are people who are finding their people, and you're a leader in that way. You're building a community and you're sort of the center of that, but you're also helping people understand themselves, and you're building something bigger than you as an individual, because the community itself takes on a life of its own, which is really what you've seen in music fandom for years, right? Like it's more than just the artist, but the artist is a leader of that. So I think that that's very, very much how a lot of creator communities work. You see people really latch on to the person for a specific reason, but then they meet the community and they start to connect with the people around that creator, and they realize that these are my people and I feel like I have a home now, and that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's great to hear your experience on that and how it's kind of led you here. So the Webby, the awards have been announced. The event is on the 12th. What can you tell us about the awards and kind of what we saw with the results there and the winners?
So we have, the awards are May 12th in New York City.
Yep.
At Cipriani Wall Street. We've been, this year is pretty interesting because we've always had, like I said, we've had creators at the Webbies for years. The presence of creators this year is going to be much more pronounced. We just had so much interest, and we have so many winners showing up. We have people like Jake Shane, who is in person. We'll have Caleb Simpson, Jameis Winston is a winner, Trixie Mattel, Leve, a musician I'm a fan of. So there's a lot more creators showing up at the Webbies this year. But we also have some great names across the rest of the internet. We're honoring Dr. Fei Li, who's sort of the godmother of AI. She's an engineer and researcher who did a lot of the fundamental work around building the research that allowed AI to develop the way it did, and now is sort of a proponent for humanity at the center of that. We'll also have Snoop Dogg as Entrepreneur of the Year. We have Walton Goggins, who is famously in White Lotus and Righteous Gemstones and other shows this year. So it's a mix of the internet, and that's the fun of the Webbies. It's not just one thing. You're going to see people from all walks of the internet, and to have them all together under one roof is something special.
It sounds like a really great eclectic mix there. And one of the other things I wanted to touch on was the Webby's report, the annual report. And I know that the Oxford's word of the year, the dictionary, was brain rot, but you were kind of miles ahead there. Can you share to me what brain rot means to you and why you think we're sort of seeing this word nowadays?
So last year, our team was ahead of the curve. We started the trend report early in the year, right, kind of before Brat Summer and before everything's really took off. And by the end of the year, it was like brain rot is now like mainstream to the point of being Oxford word of the year. It's a reaction to the absurd and overloaded times. You know, it's a combination of how much content is in your mind and in your purview at any given point in time, coupled with the destabilization of everything that comes with that around society. And so the reaction is kind of like, the only reaction is just to do something ridiculous or absurd, because it's really the only logical response to what is happening. And so it's fun, right? It's also bizarre, but it makes a lot of sense when you put it in the context of that's all you can do in these times when you're overloaded with information and the world feels like it's absolutely falling apart. Let's just make something absolutely nonsensical and have a laugh at it. But we did not, I wouldn't say we didn't expect it, but the team was pleasantly surprised to see how it just took off in a way that I don't think they could have ever predicted. And what we learned, we went out, we take the trend report out, we speak to a lot of teams and companies around the world about what we're seeing on the internet, because we get so much coming through the Webbies that we kind of have a view on the internet in a unique way, because we're seeing everybody's best work from so many different domains. We saw one of the questions I think that you brought up was insights about Gen Z that brands often miss.
Yeah.
And I wanted to call out one in particular that I thought was pretty interesting. And this is a quote from a friend of ours, a creator, Macy Gilliam. Brands are guests on social media, and we need to behave that way. So that's something that I think brands tend to forget. Like, you jump into we're going to jump into the creator space, we're going to jump into social and really participate. That's not really what social media is for, although if you can find your way in, it can work really well. The point of social media is not monetization. It's actually connection and conversation. And monetization is an outcome of that sometimes. And so it's easy to forget that as a brand. It's sometimes easy to forget that as a creator. Like, you're not just here to monetize people on the internet. You're here to do something valuable first with them. And so just for brands to remember that they're guests. They're not the main character always.
Very wise words there. But you do have a brand of the year, or there is a brand of the year award, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, this is the first year that we launched brand of the year. And brand of the year at the Webbies is really the brand that receives the most total honorary nominations and ultimately wins across both People's Voice and the Webby Awards. So this year, the winner is Google. We had a lot of great work come in from Google across many different domains, and they're our first brand of the year. And I think it's indicative that, like, brands are a part of the conversation now in a different way because of social, but also because of what the creator economy has become and how people consume content. Like I said, you have to approach it the right way. You can't just show up as a creator and expect to be taken seriously, but brands are able to sort of engage in society now in a different way. And I think that they're becoming a part of culture in a way that would not have been possible without the creator economy being what it is today.
Yeah. And how do you personally stay immersed with so much going on?
My screen time is a problem. I will say that. Every week I get that update and I'm like, man, what am I doing with my life? But then I remember that this is a big part of my job. So it's okay to be on my phone all the time. However, I stay close. We have a great team. Like, there's a lot of great people who are internet junkies across all these different areas. You can't keep up with everything. It's impossible. You follow what you follow, you try to go broad, but you have to kind of be talking to people who have different points of view. We have a really diverse team of internet sort of fans who span the gamut, if you will, including young people who are following stuff that I would never even, it's not on my radar. But I say, why is it good? What are you seeing? So we share a lot of content as a team. But we also spend probably too much time on our phones ourselves as well.
I definitely share that same challenge, and I always try to remind myself, oh yeah, but this is what I do for a job.
It is an easy thing to tell yourself. You're like, no, it's fine, but there is a limit. You know, I think that there is sort of a diminishing return at a certain point. You are rotting your brain because you're just doom scrolling through the same content over and over again. But it's good to stay up on things, but I think it's only going to get more difficult. So it's like you're never going to be able to have a pulse on every single thing that's happening on the internet. That's why you need to have a wide net. That's why I think our academy is like this wonderful way of sort of approaching the internet, because we reach wide enough to really have people who can be experts in all of those niches and all of those specific areas of the internet. And we have a great team of people who are diverse and experiences across all the different ways you can create on the internet.
Yeah. Well, Jesse, it's been great. Thank you so much for telling us about this year's awards, and I'm so happy to see that creators are officially on there. Before we wrap up, I'd love, do you have any advice for emerging creators, like if they're sort of trying to break into the industry, from your experience and from what you've seen of all of the nominees? Like, what would you recommend to an emerging creator?
I I have a few pieces of advice I would say. The the first is really, and I think that different types of creators will hear this differently, but I think about musicians first. You know, you have access to feedback now in a way that just wasn't possible when I was a musician. You can pretty quickly get a sense of if something's working with an audience or not. I think that there are creators that just inherently understand that, and they're just throwing content out to see, okay, I'm going to try a bunch of different things and I'm going to kind of go forward with what works. And that's really powerful way to grow. It's basically market feedback in real time, which is that is a huge driver of how you succeed. But at the same time, sometimes it takes time for stuff to find its place. So you have to also kind of, you really do need to have intentionality and a point of view on who you are first. And you have to sort of draw that line and say, this is who I am first. This is non-negotiable, but I am willing to explore different areas of how I create to find the thing that actually will connect with the world the right way. You can't lose yourself just by trying to adapt and evolve into anything that people want, but you also can't ignore it. You have to kind of have both sides to the story for it to work.
Yeah, that feedback and data's so valuable. I remember 20 years ago working in the TV industry, and we just had these ratings that were so broad that they just, of course, captured like the most popular TV show, but all of the niche content just got lost. You had this such rough measurement. It's amazing now that you can really go down to the retention levels of a single video. It's just night and day different how far it's come, right?
It is, and this is something that you will probably you can relate to. I mean, you could spend a lot of time arguing and like trying to figure out if something was good.
Yeah.
Before and now, it not only did you have to make those decisions, go into the studio, record the record, spend 3 months waiting to put it out, and then you hear, okay, is it good or not? Now you can kind of just try things, and you can pretty quickly see if it's going to work in the way that you thought it was going to work, at least in terms of how it's perceived by an audience. That's a huge change. It's also kind of dangerous because you can easily lose yourself in that feedback cycle. And so that's why I say you have to have a pretty strong grounding in who you are and what you want to say, but then be open-minded to how you approach your process to find the audience.
Yeah, art and science. Well, thank you so much, Jesse. It's been great to hear about it. I hope it's a great event, and I look forward to reading all about it and the next year's event too.
Yeah, thank you for having me. We're looking forward to it.